Section 0, Introduction. Intro panel. Spoiler alert, everybody dies in the end. In William Shakespeare's Hamlet, the titular anti-hero ponders mortality and considers suicide in one of English literature's most famous speeches, To Be or Not to Be, Act 3, Scene 1. Despite interacting with the ghost of his murdered father, Hamlet remains unsure about an afterlife, and faced with fear and uncertainty, he chooses to be. He still dies in the end. Everybody dies in the end. As humans, we are uniquely aware that our deaths are inevitable, a trait called mortality salience. The objects presented here draw their inspiration from this basic understanding. Recognizing death is inescapable can be daunting, but it can also motivate us to live our best lives and make them meaningful. Representations of death are universal and manifest themselves in myriad ways. This exhibition draws from an array of resources housed in special collections at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Public library collections may expose a bias toward the culture where they have been established. Nevertheless, these objects reveal a shared awareness of our fate and provide a springboard for further exploration. They give us a glimpse into one of life's greatest mysteries, with a curated perspective on what it means not to be. We encourage you to explore additional resources available throughout the Free Library of Philadelphia, as well as culturally diverse organizations across the city. Content warning. This exhibition explores themes of death, mortality, and the human experience of loss. It may contain imagery, descriptions, and objects that some viewers might find unsettling, distressing, or emotionally challenging. Viewer discretion is advised, particularly for those sensitive to discussions of grief, dying, and the afterlife. If you are affected by these themes, please take care of your well-being during your visit. Object labels. Gebbie and Company. Charles Fetcher as Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 1. Photogravure. Gravure Gebbie and Husson Company, Limited, 1888. Franco-English stage actor Charles Albert Fetcher, 1824 to 1879, established his reputation as an actor and manager at theaters in Paris. He first played Hamlet to great acclaim in London in 1861. When Fetcher immigrated to Philadelphia in 1870, he reprised that role at the Walnut Street Theater and appeared on stage regularly for the next 6 years before retiring to Richland Center, Pennsylvania, near Quakertown. He is buried at Mount Vernon Cemetery in Philadelphia. This photogravure is from The Stage and Its Stars, Past and Present. Philadelphia, Gebbie and Company, 1890. Theater Collection. Section 1. Being. Section panel. You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough. Mae West, 1893 to 1980. We navigate a daily barrage of sensory information to find our way through life. Being aware, engaged, and present in each moment helps us direct our journeys and discover endless opportunities to pursue passions, grow from challenges, celebrate triumphs, cultivate relationships, and maybe even adjust our course. By being mindful of our impact on others and taking the time to reflect on our journeys, we can find comfort in the knowledge that every moment, no matter how small, holds significance. Object labels. Metropolitan Life Company. Charting your course through life. No date. This allegorical map provides a simplistic overview of life's journey from childhood to old age in mid-20th century American culture. Health hazards are depicted as sea monsters and geohazards to avoid. Metropolitan Life, an insurance company, published cookbooklets and wellness advice, including this map art as part of its promotional material. MetLife, as it became known, began promoting affordable working men's insurance in the 1880s, and by 1930 insured 20% of the population in the United States and Canada. Today, about half of U.S. adults have some sort of life insurance policy. Map collection. Franz Liszt, 1811 to 1886, composer. Mihai Zici, 1827 to 1906, illustrator. Von der Wiege bis zum Grabe, From Cradle to Grave, Berlin, Germany, Bote and Bach, 1883. Composer Franz Liszt wrote his final symphonic poem late in life, inspired by Zici's illustration. The illustration graphically summates life's journey and is dedicated to Liszt. Liszt, in turn, dedicated his composition to Zici. This performance set is particularly poignant to music special collections, as Philadelphia music philanthropist Edwin A. Fleisher, 1877 to 1959, employed a private copyist to extract parts from this score so it would be ready for the stage. It was the last piece Fleisher personally sponsored for inclusion in his collection. He died shortly before completion of the set. 6064, entire work. Edwin A. Fleisher Collection of Orchestral Music. Miniature of the Three Living and the Three Dead. Book of Hours. Use of Bourges. Bourges, France, 1500. Books of Hours are personal Christian prayer books meant to guide daily prayer and meditation. Originating in the Middle Ages, they were usually created for wealthy individuals and families, and ornately decorated. 3 desiccated corpses and 3 living figures regard each other, separated by a crucifix atop a golden staff. Below them are skulls in a catacomb and the beginning of the prayer in Latin. With its allegory of a narrow separation between life and death, the page marks the beginning of the Office of the Dead, the reading for departed souls in purgatory on All Souls' Day, November 2nd, and for recently departed friends and family throughout the year. Louis E., 86, Rare Book Department. Section 2, Cautionary Tales. Section Panel. You see now what has happened on account of your not listening to my counsel. Jacob Grimm, 1785 to 1863, and Wilhelm Grimm, 1786 to 1859, The Golden Bird. Cautionary tales convey moral lessons to ensure safety by underscoring the dangers of certain behaviors and bad choices. These narratives come from oral traditions that evolved over generations across a wide variety of cultures, contexts, and formats. Examples include ancient Buddhist Jataka tales, focused on karma and ethical living, and the Hindu Panchatantra, and Aesop's fables that featured anthropomorphized creatures to teach simple lessons about morality, wisdom, and human nature. An entertaining and effective way to encourage vigilance, cautionary tales continue to manifest in popular culture. Reimagined in a wide variety of ways, they serve as rhetorical reminders of how not to be. Object labels. Temperance Puzzle, Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, circa 1875. At its peak in 1830, alcohol consumption for the average American was 3 times what it is today. Spirits, ciders, and ales were generally safer than water supplies, and farmers could transport and sell whiskey more easily than the grain used to make it. The temperance movement to curb alcohol use began in the 1830s as a small support group, but grew into a nationwide campaign. This rhetorical puzzle shows how the moderation movement morphed into a crusade for absolute abstinence, and alcohol was soon blamed for all societal ills. Rhetoric gave way to outright violence on the eve of Prohibition, 1920 to 1933, when Carrie Nation, 1846 to 1911, literally picked up a hatchet to attack Kansas City bars. Today, alcohol use disorder, AUD, impacts nearly 29 million people in the U.S. over the age of 12, and the U.S. has about 178,000 alcohol-related deaths every year. Archival Holdings, Children's Literature Research Collection. Benton Murdoch Spruance, 1904 to 1967, Road from the Shore, lithograph, 1936. The New Jersey coastline, or the shore as it's known locally, became a popular summer vacation spot for colonists in the early 1700s, and its popularity steadily grew. For example, in 1881, after being shot by an assassin, President James Garfield requested to be taken to Elberon, a Jersey Shore community where he would soon die. By 1935, New Jersey had more out-of-state traffic than any other state. More than 45,000 cars bound for the shore crossed the Delaware River Bridge, now the Ben Franklin Bridge, on Memorial Day weekend in 1936. Philadelphia artist Benton Spruance captures the looming danger of chaotic shore traffic. Print and Picture Collection. Nathan Sherman, 1899 to before 1976. Don't Speed, Reduce the Death Toll on the Road. Lithograph, circa 1936 to 1941. Private car ownership in the United States surged in the 1930s, with motor vehicle deaths reaching a record 37,819 victims in 1937 and 38,142 in 1941. Excessive speed ranked as the primary cause. Car makers made many safety improvements now standard in vehicles, but changing drivers' bad habits proved more challenging. The Works Progress Administration Federal Art Project produced myriad public and work safety posters between 1935 and 1942. In this poster, Philadelphia printmaker Nathan Sherman cautioned speeding drivers. Significant drops in vehicular deaths in 1938, down 18.4%, and 1942, down 30%, coincided with public education, safety features, and road improvements. Today, motor vehicle accidents are the leading cause of accidental deaths and the third leading cause of death overall in the U.S., with about 40,000 deaths annually. Gift of the Pennsylvania Works Progress Administration, 1943, Print and Picture Collection. Section 3, Child's Play. Section label. Oh, bird, you're dead. You'll never fly again. Way up high with other birds in the sky. We sing to you because you're dead. Margaret Wise Brown, 1910 to 1952. The Dead Bird. Commonly, we first encounter death in childhood through the loss of a family member, friend, neighbor, or beloved pet. Culture, religion, and family shape these early impressions and influence our behaviors and the traditions we pass along. Prior to the 1900s, most people died at home. Infant mortality was 50%, and nearly a third of children died before age 5. The average child was familiar with the process of dying and death. Books on the art of dying, Ars Moriendi, instructed the dying, family, clergy, and doctors on proper etiquette. Victorian literature commonly romanticized the death of children as the gentle transition of innocence to a better place. Object labels. Memorial card for Viola Lulu Sievers. E.C. Stark & Company, Memorial Cards, 1891. 9-month-old Viola had severe gastric symptoms and fever leading up to her death. Her diagnosis of cholera infantum with typhlitis was common among children living in crowded, unsanitary conditions. She is buried with her parents in Mount Vernon Cemetery. Infant mortality fell significantly in the 20th century when advances in perinatal health care, clean water, vaccines, food quality, and education helped bring rates down to 27% by 1950 and 4.3% as of 2020. Gift of Rebecca S. Heindel, 2021, Print and Picture Collection. Hart Pease Danks, 1837 to 1903, Louisa Jane Croppo Alden, 1834 to 1908, and Thomas Sinclair, 1807 to 1881. Birdie in Heaven, Philadelphia, Lee and Walker, 1868. Identified on the sheet music simply as Mrs. J.B.C. Alden, Louisa Jane Croppo Alden penned this mournful poem shortly after the death of her 3-year-old daughter, Mary Jane, 1864 to 1868. Composer Hart Pease Danks, known best for his sentimental 1873 hit Silver Threads Among the Gold, set the poem to music, and famed Philadelphia lithographer Thomas Sinclair created the cover art for the sheet music. A sad epilogue, Louisa's husband tragically drowned in 1874, and Danks, despite writing over 1,000 songs, would die penniless in Philadelphia. He was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in its first year in 1970. Danks's last written words were, "It's hard to die alone." 6806, Sheet Music Collection, Music Special Collections. Edward Gorey, 1925 to 2000, The Vinegar Works, The Gashley Crumb Tinies, New York, Simon & Schuster, 1963. This illustrated trilogy features Gorey's characteristically dark, visually and topically, illustrations. The most popular volume, The Gashley Crumb Tinies, is a series of 13 poetic couplets presenting the alphabet. Each letter is represented by an appropriately named child and their demise, from Amy, who fell down the stairs, to Zilla, who drank too much rum. Over half a century later, it remains a cult classic. Catherine H. McLarney Collection of Illustrated Children's Books, Children's Literature Research Collection. Tommy de Paola, 1934 to 2020. Nana Upstairs and Nana Downstairs, New York, G.P. Putnam's Sons, 1973. De Paola tells an autobiographical tale through the eyes of 4-year-old Tommy. Weekly visits to his grandmother, Nana Downstairs, and great-grandmother, Nana Upstairs, reveal the tender dynamics of home care. Tommy bonds with 94-year-old Nana Upstairs as Nana Downstairs tends to her needs. When Nana Upstairs passes away, Tommy's mother explains her death simply. Nana Upstairs won't be here anymore. When he sees a falling star, his mother suggests it is a kiss from Nana Upstairs. Years later, when Nana Downstairs also dies, Tommy again sees a shooting star and muses, "Now you are both Nana Upstairs." Catherine H. McLarney Collection of Illustrated Children's Books, Children's Literature Research Collection. Anastasia Higginbotham, born 1971. Death is Stupid. New York, The Feminist Press at CUNY, 2016. Death is Stupid takes on the confusion, questioning, and grief that a child experiences at his grandmother's viewing. Part of a widely lauded series, Ordinary Terrible Things, the books focus on children navigating difficult but typical life challenges. Historical Collection, Children's Literature Research Collection. Margaret Wise Brown, 1910 to 1952, and Christian Robinson, born 1986. The Dead Bird. New York, Harper, 2016. Before she wrote Goodnight Moon and Runaway Bunny, Brown penned the stark opening line to this book. The bird was dead when the children found it. Written in 1938 and drawn from her own childhood experience, the here and now theme centers on a group of children who find a dead bird and immerse themselves in the moment with an improvised funerary rite, complete with flowers, singing, a burial, and a tombstone. First published in 1958, after Brown's death from complications following surgery for a burst appendix, it was lauded for its plain, straightforward language and approach. The 2016 edition retains the original text, but features new, more colorful illustrations for a more modern and inclusive audience. Catherine H. McLarney Collection of Illustrated Children's Books, Children's Literature Research Collection. Sharon Spredeman Dreyer, 1940 to 2019. The Bookfinder, a guide to children's literature about the needs and problems of youth aged 2 to 15. Circle Pines, Minnesota, American Guidance Service, Incorporated, 1977. Bound biographies like this provide a valuable resource guide for a variety of topics. One sees the topical relevance of death in children's literature with examples such as entry number 255, First Snow, by Helen Coutant, born 1939, and May Vaudin, 1933 to 2009. Told within a Buddhist framework, the story revolves around a young Vietnamese girl who begins to view death as a natural part of life with the guidance of her ailing grandmother and her first experience with snow. Historical Bibliography Collection, Children's Literature Research Collection. Section 4, Dance of Death. Section label. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Traditional nursery rhyme. During the mid-14th century, the bubonic plague, Black Death, decimated Europe, killing about 1/3 of the continent's population. More than half the citizens of cities such as Paris and Florence succumbed to the disease, and entire towns, villages, and families were wiped out. Death was everywhere. The Dance of Death appeared as a popular theme in European art and literature during the 1420s, inspired largely by the Black Death that killed 25 million Europeans. The artistic allegory is known as La Danse Macabre in French, La Danza de la Muerta in Spanish, and Der Totentanz in German. Illustrations typically depict skeletons and other personifications of death, calling on people from all social classes to emphasize the universality of death, its unpredictable nature, and our own transience. Object labels. William Combe, 1742 to 1823. The English Dance of Death, from the designs of Thomas Rowlandson, 1753 to 1827. London, R. Ackerman, 1815. The English Dance of Death comprises a series of satirical poems written to accompany Rowlandson's mocking and grotesque caricatures. The poems depict death in various forms, coming to claim stereotypical members of English society, often in humorous or ironic circumstances, such as death escorting a woman away to her husband's delight. Combe explores themes of mortality, class, and the inevitable fate of all people, no matter their social standing. Death is portrayed not only as a serious and inevitable force looming over the world, as in this frontispiece, but also as a vehicle for mocking and criticizing social norms. Note the skeletons on the title page, joyously frolicking as they go collect souls. RDBEL C731E 1815V1 Rare Book Department. The Dance of Death, printed at Paris in 1490. Washington, D.C., Library of Congress, 1945. 4 figures representing death play musical instruments, bagpipes, portative organ, harp, and hurdy-gurdy, in Guillaume Marchand's, active 1483 to 1506, reproduction of Dance of Death imagery from the now-lost 1420s mural in the Cemetery of the Holy Innocents in Paris. A Latin translation of a 1485 French mortality play, La Danse Macabre Nouvelle, The New Dance of Death, by Pierre Desrets de Troyes, circa 1450 to 1514, accompanies the images. In the text, death engages with a diverse array of characters, including clergy, nobility, and common folk, cautioning each of their inescapable and impartial fate as they lament lost time. RDBGEN 1960673, Rare Book Department. Hans Holbein, circa 1497 to 1543. The Dance of Death, painted by H. Holbein and engraved by W. Hollar. London, C. Whittingham, 1804. Hans Holbein the Younger, Henry VIII's court painter, produced some of his most notable work in the 1520s with this series of woodcuts. This engraving depicts 2 skeletons leading an elderly woman in a musical march past an hourglass as one plays a glockenspiel and the other, crowned with a wreath, dances about her. The wreath, a funerary honor, symbolizes both the victory of death and the circle of life. The caption below shortens Ecclesiasticus, chapter 30, verse 17. Melor est mor quam vita amara, et requies aeterna quam languor perseverans. Death is better than a bitter life, and eternal rest than continued toil. To the rather curt, Melor est mors quam vita. Death is better than life. RDB ELKR 238, Rare Book Department. Section 5, Grave Concerns. Section label. A grave is more than a resting place. It is a reminder of our connections, our stories, and our legacies. Thomas Hardy, 1840 to 1928. Funerary practices reveal the long and complex relationship we have with our dead. Evidence of intentional human burials dates back over 100,000 years into the Stone Age, indicating early human communities cared for their deceased. Rituals surrounding death and burial help the living cope with loss, provide closure, and honor the memory of those who have passed. For many, these practices are embedded in their cultural identity and spiritual beliefs. Embalming, to prevent the natural decay of the body, originated in Egypt around 2600 BCE, primarily for royalty and prominent figures. It became common in Western culture during the 19th century, with the desire to preserve bodies for transportation and extended viewing. Funerary customs and the treatment of the dead vary greatly today and offer rich insights into societal values, beliefs about existence, and the universal human experience of mourning. Object labels. Daniel Farber, 1906 to 1998. William Dickinson, 1692, Cambridge. Probable work of the Boston Stonecutter. Joseph Lamson, 1658 to 1772. Silver gelatin print, 1973. Famed grave photographer Daniel Farber captures here the work of Joseph Lamson, who carved many headstones between 1680 and 1710. Lamson's work employed common Puritan symbols of the time: a death's head, the winged skull, tops the gravestone with the Latin phrases memento mori, remember you must die, and fugit hora, the hour flies, below. Winged cherubs move coffins on either side, flanked by corpse-like figures with sunken eyes, wrinkled lips with exposed teeth, and skeletal limbs. Their bony hands hold hourglasses and darts, reminding us of the limited time we have until the sharp suddenness of death. Print and Picture Collection. John F. Masher, 1824 to 1862. Post-mortem portrait of Jonathan Williams Biddle, stereoscopic daguerreotype, 1856. Within months of registering the patent for a viewer that created three-dimensional images from two daguerreotypes taken from slightly different angles, Masher was selling his stereoscope in 5 major U.S. cities. Scientific American praised the viewer for its ability to preserve memories of loved ones as they once were with us. When Philadelphia lawyer J. Williams Biddle, 1821 to 1856, died, a photographer captured these images for posterity. Originally buried in Laurel Hill Cemetery, Philadelphia, his remains were moved to St. Thomas Church Cemetery, White Marsh, Pennsylvania, in 1894. A stereoscopic daguerreotype is an early form of 3D photography that combines the daguerreotype process, the first publicly announced photographic technique, with stereoscopy, a method for creating the illusion of depth. The 3D effect comes entirely from the stereo pair, not any manipulation of the daguerreotype process itself. These are not duplicate images. Each plate is a separate photograph with a unique viewpoint. The result is a surprisingly vivid and immersive depth experience, considering the technology's age. Use the stereoscopic viewer and look directly at the image to experience the depth and dimensional effect of the stereoscope. Print and Picture Collection. Matthew Reinhardt, born 1971, and Robert Sabuda, born 1965. Encyclopedia Mythologica, Gods and Heroes, Somerville, Massachusetts, Candlewick Press, 2010. This elaborate and colorful pop-up book, introducing gods and goddesses from a wide variety of cultures, opens with Anubis, an Egyptian god associated with death and the afterlife. Anubis appears frequently in ancient Egyptian art as a jackal or jackal-headed figure from around 3000 BCE into the next millennium. He oversaw the post-mortem weighing of the heart, in which the departed were judged worthy to enter the realm of the dead. Souls weighed down with sin failed the test and would be devoured by Ammit, a nightmarish creature blending features of a crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. Toy and Movable Book Collection, Children's Literature Research Collection. Lind Kendall Ward, 1905 to 1985. Untitled, from Now That the Gods Are Dead. Wood engraving, 1932. Artist Lind Ward encouraged British novelist Llewellyn Powys, 1884 to 1939, to pen a book for which the artist would provide 4 illustrations. This image accompanied the text, "Dead, dead, dead, all dead, utterly forgotten. I have but to think of the congregation in the village church of my home as it used to be, Sunday after Sunday. My time would, now, be fully occupied in counting the skulls now under the ground." Print and Picture Collection. Harold Edward Nick Carter, 1900 to 1968. Photographer, Chinese Cemetery, Bala-Cynwyd, Pennsylvania. Photograph, The Philadelphia Inquirer, 1940. The Qingming Festival, also known as Tomb Sweeping Day, is celebrated on the 15th day after the spring equinox. This Chinese holiday is dedicated to visiting the graves of ancestors. Family members pay respect by cleaning graves, burning joss sticks and paper, Chinese incense, and making offerings of traditional foods ranging from simple fruits and boiled eggs to elaborate dishes such as the roast suckling pig seen here. These offerings provide comfort in the afterlife and compel ancestors' lingering spirits to influence the fortune and fate of the living. Widespread throughout Asia, the practice came to Philadelphia with the development and growth of Chinatown in the late 1800s. Print and Picture Collection. Samuel Castner, Jr., 1843 to 1929, scrapbook compiler. Decoration Day at Philadelphia, orphans decorating their fathers' graves in Glenwood Cemetery. From the Illustrated London News, June 24, 1876. Wood engraving, scrapbook, 1876. Originally known as Decoration Day and first celebrated on May 30th, 1868, Memorial Day is now a federal holiday celebrated annually on the last Monday in May. As the caption indicates, orphans of the Civil War place flags in the now defunct Glenwood Cemetery. More than 700 Union and Confederate soldiers were interred there before being moved to the Philadelphia National Cemetery in 1891. New burials were halted in 1921, and Glenwood was officially closed by the city in 1938. The remaining burials were relocated to Glenwood Memorial Gardens in Broomall, Pennsylvania. A917.481, P536V3, Print and Picture Collection. Alina Josin, born 1980, J.C. Webster, born 1957, and Roger Bignoni, born 1978. Mass Heap, Triptych, screen print, 2018. This collaborative work by three Philadelphia artists was created for an exhibit at the Philadelphia Mausoleum of Contemporary Art, PhilaMOCA, in 2018. The choice of subject matter, a cavernous underworld littered with skulls, fit the aptly named venue particularly well, as the multipurpose art space resides in the historic Finney & Sons building that served as a showroom for mausoleums in the 19th century. Gift of Alina Josin, 2021, Print and Picture Collection. Lydia Smith, born 1995. Death and All His Friends, Flag for Philadelphia Cemeteries. Screen print on fabric, ribbon border, 2018. Ohio-based interdisciplinary artist Lydia Smith has been exploring what is marked, lost, and lingers in the aftermath of death for the past decade. This grouping of 11 Philadelphia cemetery maps reveals the geographic mark the dead have made upon the land of the living. A tactile version of the art map complements this exhibit through the kind permission of the artist. Gift of Lydia Smith, Map Collection. Surveyed by Isaac Shallcross, 1797 to 1881, engraved by M. H. Trauble, 1820 to 1897, printed by J. F. Finkelday, 1821 to 1883. Cedar Hill Cemetery Plan, ink and paper, circa 1853. The Cedar Hill Cemetery Company formed in 1850 to establish a burial ground in the Frankford section of Philadelphia. Isaac Shallcross, a self-taught surveyor, served as one of the Cedar Hill founders prior to his appointments as a county and city surveyor. 3 times married and widowed, Shallcross himself had his first 2 wives reinterred in North Hill Cemetery, where he and all 3 of his wives rest in Section G, number 116. Map Collection. Section 6, Great Equalizer. Section label. Death comes to every individual. There is an amazing democracy about death. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., 1929 to 1968. Death is one of the few experiences that unites everyone in the world, regardless of race, gender, profession, wealth, background, or beliefs. Ultimately, we all face the same fate. In a strange way, that can be comforting, to recognize our shared humanity and the fact that we are all in this together. Because death does not discriminate, it is commonly called the Great Equalizer. It strips away divisions and reminds us that, at our core, we are only human after all. Object labels. Alexander Anderson, 1775 to 1870, engraver. Emblems of mortality, representing, in upwards of 50 cuts, death seizing all ranks and degrees of people, with an apostrophe to each. Hartford, Connecticut. Printed by John Babcock, 1801. Anderson took his inspiration for this work from the Basel Dance of Death, a 200-foot-long 15th century fresco painted on a cemetery wall in Switzerland. His illustrations depict death accosting people of all social ranks to remind the reader that all humans are ultimately equal in the burial ground. Shortly after this book was published, the original wall, by then considered an eyesore, was demolished. RBD, CB, 1801, EM15M, Rare Book Department. Creator unknown. In memory of Abraham Lincoln. Mourning card, 1865. On April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln became the first U.S. president to be assassinated. On April 18th, he became the first to lie in state. Thousands of mourners lined up for a chance to see the late president. For the next 10 days, a train, colloquially dubbed the Lincoln Express, carried his decaying corpse on a 1,700-mile tour from Washington, D.C. to Lincoln's hometown of Springfield, Illinois, with multiple stops across 6 states. In Philadelphia, approximately 150,000 people passed his coffin over a 20-hour period. Despite consulting embalmers and morticians along the way, a reporter in New York noted the impact of organic forces with which the King of Terrors completes the sentence, dust to dust. Print and Picture Collection. Schley Association. Francis Licton, 1889 to 1961, illustrator. A Night in Hades, invitation. Philadelphia, Schley Association, 1923, facsimile. In the mid-1920s, the Schley Association, a Jewish social club, held elaborate balls in the spring and fall. Costumed themes included the court of Henry XVI during Benjamin Franklin's visit and a night in Baghdad under Ottoman rule. A Night in Hades beckoned guests to cross the river Styx, which separated the worlds of the living and the dead, to enter Philadelphia's Ritz-Carlton Ballroom, converted into the underworld of Greek mythology. Catherine Milhouse and Francis Licton Papers, Children's Literature Research Collection. Section 7. War, Disease, and Violence. Section label. Something is wrong here. War, disease, death, destruction, hunger, filth, poverty, torture, crime, corruption, and the ice capades. Something is definitely wrong. George Carlin, 1937 to 2008. While death may be the great equalizer, the circumstances leading to it are shaped by social, economic, and environmental factors. Documented disparities in mortality rates exist across race, ethnicity, nationality, and social class. Barriers to healthcare and nutrition, exposure to environmental hazards, systemic inequities, war, targeted violence, and public health crises all contribute to these differences. Acknowledging and addressing these complex issues is essential to advancing equity in both life and death. Object labels. Tong H. Wong, born 1964. The Man Who Suffered from AIDS. Charcoal drawing, 1987. In June 1981, the medical community began documenting the first signs of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. By 1995, HIV-related deaths in the U.S. skyrocketed to over 48,000 people. This striking image captures an anguished man, emaciated by the disease, breathing through an oxygen mask as his essence seems to spiral away. As of 2023, an estimated 40 million people are living with HIV worldwide. Since its beginning, the AIDS epidemic has claimed over 42 million lives. Improved antiviral therapy and efforts by the World Health Organization have led to a nearly 70% decrease in deaths over the past 20 years. Print and picture collection. Charles Henry Sykes, 1882 to 1942. What wonderful weather we're having! Charcoal and ink drawing, 1919. In early 1918, less than a year after the U.S. entered World War I, a 3-day flu broke out at Camp Funston in Fort Riley, Kansas, affecting 522 men. As troops moved about the country, training and preparing for deployment, so did the disease. The flu, or the grip, entered European trenches with American soldiers and soon spread across the continent. Wartime censors commonly suppressed negative stories to boost wartime morale, and news reports remained largely silent until the full-blown pandemic hit Spain. As a result, the press would call it the Spanish flu. By 1920, the flu had infected a third of the global population and killed around 50 million people, contributing to the end of the war. For perspective, the COVID-19 outbreak has resulted in the death of approximately 7 million people worldwide. Print and picture collection. Benton Murdoch Spruance, 1904 to 1967. Fathers and Sons. Lithograph, 1943. On the eve of U.S. involvement in World War II, all men between the ages of 21 and 45 were required to register for selective service, the draft. 10 million were inducted, forming 60% of U.S. forces. Approximately 25% of American men would enter service during World War II, and a significant number of families had multiple generations serving. World War II remains the deadliest conflict in human history, with an estimated 50 to 85 million deaths, most of them civilians. The U.S. suffered 400,000 deaths in the war. Print and picture collection. Carol Rosen, 1933 to 2014. The Holocaust, Series 8, A Children's Tale. New Jersey. C. Rosen, 1999. U.S. artist Carol Rosen often explored death in her work, and in her mid-60s took on the Holocaust. Her use of vellum-like material to carry her message should be noted. Traditionally, vellum is made of dried skin. Rosen described her work in this way. There is no way to recreate the events or the severe psychological destructiveness of the Holocaust experience by those who were not its victims. One can only approximate the truth by implying the isolation, state of fear, uncertainty, and disorientation which were their constant companions. PIXBA R7223H, Print and Picture Collection. Doc's Thrash, 1893 to 1965. Untitled, Dead Man After Hanging. Pencil and ink, no date. Thrash drew this gut-wrenching print in an era when Senators Edward P. Costigan, Democrat Colorado, and Robert F. Wagner, Democrat New York, twice attempted to pass anti-lynching legislation. Legislation failed to pass Congress until the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was signed into law by President Biden in 2022. Till was murdered in 1955. The NAACP and Tuskegee Institute have documented nearly 5,000 lynchings between 1882 and 1968. This is likely underestimated because no formal tracking existed. Lynchings overwhelmingly impacted Black people, who account for 72% of victims. Most lynchings occurred in the Cotton Belt, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, as a weapon of terror. Print and picture collection. Lynn Kendall Ward, 1905 to 1985. Spring Idol. Wood engraving, circa 1933. Nearly 30 years before President Eisenhower warned citizens of the military-industrial complex, Ward captured the link between politics, war, and industry in this woodblock print. An angel of death, unleashed by political rhetoric, drops bombs over a graveyard while also raining money on a factory. Notably, during World War II, Ward went on to work at a factory, assembling gyroscopes for aircrafts. Lynn Ward Papers, Children's Literature Research Collection. Faith Ringgold, 1930 to 2024. United States of Attica. Ink and Paper, 2022. Reprint of the 1972 original. In September 1971, prisoners in Attica Correctional Facility took control of the prison to protest deplorable and overcrowded conditions at the maximum security prison. For 4 days, prisoners held 42 staff members hostage while negotiating for improvements. After agreeing to most of the demands, then New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller sent in armed police and corrections officers to take back control. 39 of the 43 people who lost their lives in the incident were killed when authorities deployed tear gas and opened fire. This map, featuring the colors of the Pan-African flag, was Faith Ringgold's most popular poster in the 1970s. The title references the needless killing, while illustrating the locations and dates of violence against indigenous peoples, enslaved people, assassinations, witch hunts, and other violence committed in and by the United States. Map collection. Dr. Seuss, 1904 to 1991, illustrations, and Monroe Leaf, 1905 to 1976, text. This is Anne. She drinks blood. Washington, D.C. Army Orientation Course, Special Service Division, Army Service Forces, U.S. War Department. November 8, 1943. Malaria, a mosquito-borne parasitic disease, has plagued humanity for thousands of years. In the 20th century, it claimed up to 300 million lives. Malaria became a major health issue for the United States military personnel during World War II, as they were deployed to tropical and subtropical regions where the disease is most common. The U.S. government established education and prevention programs that ultimately led to the formation of the Centers for Disease Control, CDC. This informational poster provides tips for prevention with accompanying drawings by Captain Theodore Geisel, better known by his pen name, Dr. Seuss. Map collection. Felix Octavius Carr Darley, 1822 to 1888. Battle of Wilson's Creek and Death of General Lyon. Ink and pencil drawing, circa 1862. Philadelphia-born illustrator Felix Octavius Carr Darley immortalizes the moment United States Army officer Nathaniel Lyon, 1818 to 1861, became the first Union general to die in battle during the Civil War. While defending Springfield, Missouri from Confederate forces, General Lyon was wounded in the head and leg and had his horse shot from under him. Outnumbered 2-1, he returned to Union lines, commandeered another horse, and led a counterattack, only to be fatally shot through the chest on Bloody Hill. After a brief burial in Missouri, his body was returned to Hartford, Connecticut, where he would lie in state. His procession stopped for public viewings in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York along the way. Lyon was reinterred in a family plot in Connecticut, where 20,000 attended his funeral. Print and picture collection. Rebecca Gilbert, born 1975. The Grocery Clerk, the essential worker from A Dance of Death in 2 parts. Wood engraving with letterpress, 2021. Philadelphia artist Rebecca Gilbert resurrected Hans Holbein's illustrative 16th century Dance of Death for an updated series of images and verse. In this example, she offers a perspective from the recent COVID pandemic, complete with a ubiquitous warning to maintain distance to prevent exposure. Gilbert noted that much changes through time, with the exception of this one equalizing truth. Print and Picture Collection. Benton Murdoch Spruance, 1904 to 1967. Visitor to Germantown. Lithograph, 1935. Following the ravages of the Great Depression in the 1930s, a growing number of residents were forced out of their homes. Spruance's allegorical figure of death sits on the steps of a foreclosed and abandoned home, commenting on the demise of the Germantown neighborhood. Print and Picture Collection. Section 8. What Dreams May Come. Section label. Last night the wife said, "Oh boy, when you're dead you don't take nothing with you but your soul. Think." John Lennon, 1940 to 1980. Without conclusive evidence, beliefs about the afterlife remain deeply personal and shaped by culture, philosophy, and faith. Religious views on the afterlife vary greatly. Some traditions hold that the soul is judged and rewarded or punished based on how one lived, while others assert that the soul is reincarnated until it achieves enlightenment. Conversely, many secular or non-religious views reject the idea of an afterlife, perceiving death as the end of existence, comparable to what we experience before birth. Object labels. Book of Hours, Use of Rome, Bruges, Belgium, circa 1430. This miniature opens the 7 penitential psalms, which express sorrow for sin and are commonly recited for penance and for the dead. Although these are lamentations, the looming angels suggest archangels Michael and Gabriel as they announce the last judgment of the living and the dead, seen rising from their graves, and the impending battle with Satan, depicted in the lower right corner. Lewis E., 99, Rare Book Department. Book of Hours, Use of Coutances, Rouen, France, circa 1475 to 1500. Gracing the beginning of Vespers of the Hours of the Virgin, one of 2 evening prayers invoking aid and comfort from Mary, this miniature depicts the dormition of the Mother of God. It depicts Mary at peace in death and reunited with her husband Joseph in heaven. Since 1950, however, Catholic dogma is that Mary was assumed, body and soul, into heaven. Lewis E., 90, Rare Book Department. Francis Johnson, 1792 to 1844, composer. Sarah Louisa Fortin, 1814 to 1883, lyric. Grave of the Slave, Philadelphia, Fiat Magnan and Company, circa 1840. In 1831, 17-year-old Sarah Louisa Fortin published the poem The Grave of the Slave in The Liberator, an abolitionist publication. In 4 poignant verses credited under the simple pseudonym Ada, Sarah illustrates the tragic plight of an enslaved person who could only find freedom in death and eternal peace in heaven. She composed 11 similarly themed poems for The Liberator over the next 4 years. Her neighbor, Philadelphia composer Francis Johnson, set Sarah's poem to music with piano accompaniment. The sheet music merely attributes the lyric to a lady of Philadelphia. The song became an abolitionist anthem with regular performances at anti-slavery events. Sheet Music Collection, 10932. Music Special Collections. Leaf from Siyer Nebi, Life of the Prophet, Turkey, circa 1550 to 1650. Manuscript page, ink, opaque watercolor, and gold leaf on polished paper. This illuminated page comes from the 6-volume Ottoman manuscript Siyer Nebi, Life of the Prophet, an Islamic text focused on the birth, life, revelations, and death of the Prophet Muhammad, circa 570 to 632. The text documents the simple burial of the Prophet, who is washed, shrouded, and buried very simply, the model for Islamic funerary traditions. The image here depicts the sinners in Jahannam, hell, as they are eternally tortured by serpents and scorpions. Looming over the nightmarish scene and breaking the border is one of the Zabaninha, angels tasked by Allah with the just punishment of the unrepentant. Rare Book Department. Julius T. Bloch, 1888 to 1966. The Green Pastures. Lithograph, circa 1934 to 1935. Social realist artist Bloch centered much of his artwork on working people with a special affinity for African American topics. During the mid-1800s, enslaved people in the U.S. were largely converted to Christianity through widespread Protestant evangelism. Intended in part as social control, religion nevertheless provided a platform for passive protest and consolation through community. For some, death was not seen as an end, but as a release from suffering and as a return to loved ones. Bloch's print reflects this deep spiritual perspective of the afterlife. Print and Picture Collection. Alfred Mullen, 1868 to 1936, composer, and R. Kitchen, poetry. Uncle Tom's Cabin, The Death of Uncle Tom, London, B. Williams, Indeterminate 1800s. Uncle Tom's Cabin, 1852, by Harriet Beecher Stowe, 1811 to 1896, was the best-selling novel in the United States during the 19th century. Its abolitionist theme condemned slavery's immorality. Tom, a deeply Christian enslaved man, passively resists the cruel plantation owner, Simon Legree, in order to help his fellow enslaved people. Legree's fury seals Tom's fate, which parallels Jesus' journey to the cross. This illustration depicts Tom as he is dying from a vicious beating. The illustration evokes the image of Jesus' descent from the cross in the Stations of the Cross. George Shelby, who holds Tom's hand with Legree looming outside, has arrived too late to save Tom. Shelby is so moved by Tom's unwavering faith and forgiveness of his tormentors that he vows to release all enslaved people on his own property. The story highlights themes of redemption, sacrifice, and the transformative power of enduring suffering for a higher purpose and the world beyond. Harry Dichter, Sheet Music Collection. Music Special Collections. Book of Going Forth by Day, Book of the Dead. Ink on papyrus, circa 600 BCE. The Book of Going Forth by Day, commonly known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, was a practical guide for the deceased and their families as they entered the afterlife. The text was standardized but customizable and was used by those who could afford a formal funeral. It was buried with the deceased, as this one had been, and contained instructions for preparing the body, as well as up to 189 spells, including incantations for navigating the underworld, the weighing of the heart, and protection from peril. This leaf contains spells of protection against crocodiles, snakes, and insects. Lewis O., 153, Rare Book Department. Section 00, Last Words. Section label. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. Seneca, 5 BCE to 65 CE. And so our journey ends. The items gathered here speak to the universal human experience that bonds us across time and cultures. Death touches us all and will take us in a final embrace. Memento mori, remember you will die. The creators of these items, however, also reach out across time to remind us, memento te vivere, remember you live. Moving beyond this exhibition, cherish the time you have, remember those who have come before, create memories for those we leave behind, and look at every day as an opportunity to be. Review Committee Acknowledgement. The curators of Or Not to Be appreciate the input and assistance of the exhibition's review committee. The exhibition benefited immeasurably from the feedback and support of the following individuals. Shahada Abdul Rashid, Free Library of Philadelphia. Vincent Eldering, Free Library of Philadelphia. Kaylee Ayakoveta, Free Library of Philadelphia. Maya Kang, Executive Director, Philadelphia Folklore Project. Jessica Martucci, Curator, the Barbara Bates Center for the Study of the History of Nursing, University of Pennsylvania. Sarah Mitchell, Free Library of Philadelphia. Matthew Skick, Director of Collections and Exhibitions, Museum of the American Revolution. Kalela Williams, Author and Director, Virginia Center for the Book, Virginia Humanities. Free Library Acknowledgements. Thank you to all those who contributed to this show. Curators, Gary Galvan, PhD. Jillian Robbins. Project Team, Allison Fryermuth, Janine Pollock. Graphic Design Studio, Jen Wells. Collection Care, Nina Coffin, Meg Newberger, Eriko Takahashi, Stephanie Westerland. Gallery Preparator, Matt Giel. Accessibility Services and Materials, Clovernook Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Free Library Staff, Christopher Biss Brown, Mark Clace, Sophia DeHaab, Kelly Davis, Grace DiLiberto, Aaron Fry, Bridget Goodfellow, Maria Gudauskas, Jessica Holton, Megan McCall, Laura Strofolino, Karen Suni, Brianna Verano. Harmful Language and Image Statement. The mission of the Free Library of Philadelphia is to advance literacy, guide learning, and inspire curiosity. The Free Library strives to ensure that our resources represent our diverse community, although we acknowledge that our materials must be more inclusive. Materials on display illustrate the social mindsets and perspectives of their time, reflecting the society in which they were produced. We cannot change the historical record, nor do we seek to diminish our institutional complicity, but we are mindful of how we discuss and present information. We believe this is crucial for welcoming all patrons and building an inclusive and equitable society. Resource guide available. Resources for those who are grieving and coping with loss. End of guide, narrated for you by Christopher Mundy.